The new Boruto to Blue Vortex Chapter 5 is finally here, and this is such a good review. I mentioned so many important things that you may won't get anywhere else, not gonna lie, it's really good. Especially because I might have found another connection between Amado and the Shinju. But not just any Shinju, the leader. He's somehow different from the others, especially the Sasuke one. He's kind of manipulative. Everyone seems to be confused about their own existence, but not him. In fact, he tells them who they are supposed to be and what they need to do. Let's talk about it. As always, our tradition is to first quickly conclude the month with all confirmed predictions and theories. And then we move on to the chapter review. First of all, the likelihood that Boruto learned the Chidori, which would also imply that he has now the ability to use either the Jogan or Momoshiki's Byakugan instead of the Sharingan. Otherwise, the Chidori wouldn't be possible.
Another one.
That the Shinjus are like a shared organism with different personalities, but they are one and the same being, working together to achieve their final form.
Another one.
That Amado will know that Kawaki is not Boruto and the other way around, but that he would pretend that he knew it because of the technology and his computer code. The pretending part isn't confirmed, but I'm certainly doubling down on that.
Another one.
And also that Shikamaru would suspect something as well and secretly investigate that idea. Okay, now, the new Boruto chapter begins with a long-anticipated flashback of the time skip, but it's worth mentioning that this is by far not everything there is to know about the time skip. We barely got to know the context we actually need to further understand the plot around Koji and how Boruto found out the truth about the Shinju. This will certainly be revealed in later chapters, probably when Boruto and Konoha will come together to discuss the situation. Obviously, now they will listen to him, especially with the evidence they have collected from Amado secretly. I have talked more about the things not shown in this chapter in my last video. Feel free to check it out once you have finished this Boruto to Blue Vortex Chapter 5 review. The chapter begins with Sasuke training Boruto. We haven't really seen what exactly he has taught him, but Sasuke made it pretty clear that Boruto not only surpassed Sasuke in every imaginable way, but also learned everything Sasuke can in no time. It's been a year, that's crazy. And that's evidently because Boruto is Notsutsuki, and with that, every ninjutsu is for him like using Shinjutsu. Momoshiki has proven that by learning the Rasengan in a second, which is why it's assumable that Koji only recently met Boruto because Boruto hadn't yet perfected Minato's time-space jutsu, and yet he's already capable of teleporting to another dimension. Pretty impressive. But I think Sasuke didn't really get it. He calls Boruto a genius rather than understanding that he's simply Notsutsuki. Don't get me wrong, Boruto certainly is a genius. But clearly the way he learns everything is because he's a Notsutsuki, not because he's a genius. At least that's not the only reason. One thing I'm eager to know is whether Boruto really did learn everything an Uchiha can, because that's what this campfire scene implied. I first thought he was jokingly referring to his hairstyle and clothes, but based on the further context, it seems like he was actually referring to the techniques and simply didn't cut his hair. The thing is, an Uchiha heavily relies on the Sharingan. Sure, there are some fire jutsus here and there, but the Sharingan is the go-to technique if you want to become strong as an Uchiha. So does this actually mean that the Jogan could be used as a substitute for the Sharingan? Or rather, could it be that because Boruto is actually Notsutsuki, and with that, the attributes of a Sharingan are naturally within him, that he's able to use all jutsus naturally without the Sharingan, because a Sharingan is simply derived from a red Rinnegan. And almost every Otsutsuki has a Rinnegan, Momoshiki certainly did. And I know many of y'all don't like the fact that Boruto might have a Rinnegan, but we can't ignore the simple fact that a Karma is literally copying the body of the Otsutsuki. Just like Kawaki received all the jutsus from Ishiki, so must Boruto have received all the jutsus from Momoshiki. And though jutsus aren't always manifested in eyes, it's common to have them on the forehead or palms. Now, some might argue that his Karma itself works like a Rinnegan, but that's still the same, it's still a Rinnegan. He can't have no Rinnegan. It's illogical unless the few percentage, I believe 18, that Momoshiki gave up to save Boruto were actually the ones that would give Boruto the Rinnegan. That I will agree is possible. But the point is that theoretically it doesn't even matter. Take for example the Susanoo. Humans can only use this technique if they have the Sharingan, but in Otsutsuki doesn't need that because they use chakra in an entirely different way. In theory, Boruto could just do the Susanoo because his body is fundamentally different from humans, so he can do everything anyway. Or as mentioned, his Jogan might work as a substitute for that. Of course, there's also the genetic aspect, more to that in a moment. So when they were talking about the Uchiha style, it could very well be everything Sasuke can. Like, I'm talking about full-scale Sasuke, maybe not specifics like Amaterasu, but the standard techniques. Again, because all ninjutsu are an attempt to replicate Shinjutsu. And although some Shinjutsus are unique to only certain Otsutsuki, some are used by all of them, so it depends on the genetics Boruto has. And Momoshiki, obviously. However, all the human genetics come from Kaguya, who had the red Rinnegan from where the Sharingan derived. And Momoshiki had the same, and on top of that, Boruto also has Kaguya's DNA, so maybe the Otsutsukification triggered the remaining DNA to artificially construct. There are many possibilities. But let's be honest, what can Uchiha style be if not either the hair, which would be ridiculous, or everything a Sharingan can? Or rather, everything Sasuke can. The only Uchiha alive aside from Sarada. And let's be honest, Sasuke wasn't acting like they were talking about his style, but rather as if they were actually referring to Sasuke's techniques. And here's a small detail I noticed in that regard. Boruto's sword is actually broken, which is the main reason why he took Sasuke's. When Sasuke used his Chidori with his sword, which we know he can only do with a Sharingan, then Boruto clearly focused on that technique as if he's currently learning it himself. So what if Boruto hasn't mastered this technique yet, and while attempting it he broke his sword because he used way too much power and it's just not under control yet? But that would mean that Boruto can use the Chidori anyway, which means he either does have a red Rinnegan or something similar as a substitute. Maybe the Byakugan even works because I believe the main reason why a Sharingan was necessary is due to the tunnel vision or something like that. I think an advanced Byakugan like the one Momoshiki has can certainly work for that as well, or as mentioned the Jogan. But that also opens up the possibility that he may also be able to use other Sharingan techniques with, for example, his Rinnegan DNA, or Jogan or Kaguya's DNA, yada yada yada. Imagine Boruto and Susanoo, that would be sick. It could also be Uzuhiko, which might even really be the case based on the image we have seen where Sasuke became a tree. We see such spherical distraction as if Boruto was flying around with a full-body Rasengan, which we on this channel here believe to be Uzuhiko. What's interesting is that we have seen the same type of distraction when Boruto was fighting Kawaki in the first chapter. Then Sasuke revealed that he still basically doesn't see who Boruto really is. However, he does agree that something odd is happening and that Sarada for some reason must be the key to understand, simply because she was not affected and on top of that, awakened her Mangekyo. And then Uchiha knows that something really horrible must happen for this awakening to occur. Then we see the whole scene of how Sasuke became a tree, that is, it's actually the moment when Code attacked them. Even if it's not much, this scene says a lot about how Boruto got to know about the Shinjus. If that moment was when Boruto immediately understood all the danger, then Code would certainly also know the truth, but he doesn't. He didn't even get it when Buck was absorbed. So someone must have told Boruto about it, or as mentioned in my previous video, one of the Shinjus actually attacked Boruto. In that case, it can be Sasuke, otherwise, how else could he make that connection? Unless it was the leader and Boruto and Sasuke met him at some point earlier in his human form and then he also got absorbed. I really hope the main Shinju isn't Simp-kun. This would be hella weird, not gonna lie. Anyway, furthermore, this pretty casual moment makes the fact that Koji didn't approach Boruto until Sasuke was gone much more suspicious. Does it mean that Koji wouldn't have approached Boruto if Sasuke hadn't been absorbed? Because if that's the case, we can certainly assume that Koji somehow helped Code to find Boruto. I mean, how else could Code have found them? Amado has confirmed that Code is literally stupid, this is canon. Not in a joking way, but he really is unintelligent, probably one of the stupidest characters in the story. So how could he have found them if not with a clue? Which would be pretty problematic because then we would have to assume that Amado targets certain DNAs, and if that's true, then I highly recommend this video here. It's pretty complicated, but in short, it seems that Amado is from the future and the fact that his daughter is dead is not due to a disease, but because someone went into the past and changed time so that Akibi wasn't born. And now Amado collects DNA including Sakura's, which he implanted into Eida, which is maybe why Bak targets her. But also in Kawaki possibly the DNA of Sasuke and Naruto, which is why Sasuke was targeted and which is also why Naruto is now targeted as well as Sarada. As if I could be someone from the future who happened to be from the family tree derived from Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Boruto, Sarada and so on, and whoever else might be involved. But since certain people weren't born due to the time change, Amado returned in time and artificially collects the DNA, changes reality and creates a Shinju that further develops consciousness with the necessary DNA, so to speak. But that's just a theory. The highlight is always instinct, mentioned over and over again. And instinct is usually something written in DNA, which Amado does all the time, manipulating DNA, cloning and so on. The only thing that doesn't quite fit the idea that Akebi is from the family tree of Naruto and Sasuke is the fact that the female Shinju is targeting the Ino Shika Cho trio and Sarutobi Konohamaru, indicating that the instinct is actually related to the people the Shinjus are interested in their human version, and not so much pre-programmed. Which is why Bak the pervert targeted Eida, for example, unless we assume that Amado was able to control the Ten-Tail somehow remotely, which is why one of them attacked Sarada because now the Sasuke Shinju targets Sarada as well, as if Sarada was always supposed to be targeted. Then something so obvious, why didn't I think of it? Moegi is that one female Shinju. I was making a video about her because of her head mask, whatever that is. I was literally looking into what that might be based on the shape. And instead of checking all characters in Naruto and Boruto, I looked for references online. Won't happen again, now I know how Kishimoto is playing this game. What's really interesting is that the Moegi Shinju mentioned she can feel the anger of Konohamaru. This means they are a special existence if they can remotely feel the anger of people surrounding her host body. The leader Shinju also confirmed this by mentioning that her sensitivity is being stimulated, indicating that it must be some sort of attribute that the God Tree race has naturally, just like Otsutskis have certain attributes by nature. Since chakra does reveal the feeling of emotions and because Shinjus are actually nothing but chakra just like the tailed beasts, it's possible that they actually function on the level of Ninshu. This would mean that Ninshu isn't derived from Shinjutsu but is a unique and separate concept that Hagoromo didn't discover because he's a half Otsutsuki, but because he's such a genius, and likely because he inherited 50% of the chakra fruit from Kaguya, and used it not like an Otsutsuki but was forced to use it in a different way. That would be extremely interesting because it would imply that Shinjus are actually connected to the entire world just like Hagoromo, which is why they can basically possess the bodies of humans even if it's not really a possession, but you get the idea. They also use them as some sort of remote antenna or something and feel the emotions of people around because even emotions are connected to chakra. That's how ninja works. That will be insane because it will make every Shinju on the level of Hagoromo, and that's extremely dangerous because Hagoromo never tried to use ninja as a weapon. But it doesn't mean that it's not possible. And so if they do that, then certainly the world is doomed. In any case, I'm excited that these four characters finally get their moment. They felt like side characters, so I'm down for that. The main Shinju then further states that even if they feel emotions from others, they still have their own, and even if they exist as one Shinju, they are also individual beings. And that's exactly what I assumed in the last chapter review when I stated that they seem to be a shared organism, which could mean that they might also be able to use the techniques that each of them receives from their host. If the Rinnegan, for example, didn't come from the Rinnegan that the Ten-Tails naturally had, which was not implied at the beginning of their existence where they clearly didn't have the Rinnegan, then the Rinnegan might come from the consumption of Sasuke. And indeed, this idea is supported by the flashback as well because none of them showed the Rinnegan at that time, but all of them did when they attacked Konoha. And Boruto wasn't even surprised because at this time he already knew the truth. And when they were talking about their target, they focused on the dojutsus as if it's important. So if this is true, it means at this point they should be able to use all Uchiha abilities and now even would release. And if that's true, then they better protect Eida because that's the last thing we need. Same goes for Naruto. So this means that the idea that their instinct is determined based on the relationship of the original host of the Shinju to the human is wrong. At least for the leader. Because we don't know anyone who looks like the leader Shinju who has a particular interest in Naruto. And certainly not Simp-kun here. Unless whoever this is also from the future. All this again implies that Amado indeed targets manipulates DNA and could possibly control the main Shinju, who in turn manipulates the others. Then we would have to argue that for some reason even Moegi and the ones she targets are also in play. Unless of course there are certain Shinjus who are just there because that's simply how the Shinjus exist. And Amado only controls certain ones, or rather is only interested in certain DNA. So it doesn't matter what the female Shinju does, she's just an extra, completely irrelevant. I will definitely dig deeper into that in another video, so don't forget to subscribe. The main Shinju also states that their final evolution will happen once they absorb not only either Boruto or Kawaki, but both of them. Which is weird because usually that's not the case, one is completely enough. And why do they ignore Code? He's not a Otsutsuki, but almost. So that's also intriguing, as if they need Code alive. But it could also very well be that maybe it's once again a matter of DNA. Possibly something to do with Ishiki and Momoshiki, or maybe the Jogan, who knows. Anyway, it's odd that the main characters must be absorbed in order for the current main villain to achieve its full form. Which on the other hand means that the Shinju is obviously not the main villain, and it will not reach its full potential but will be absorbed by someone else, who will then reach its full potential in return. Because as we know, not only can Shinjus use Otsutsukis, but Otsutsukis can use them equally in return to become stronger. So there's an Otsutsuki in the background. Maybe it's Amado, maybe they manipulate Amado. What's really fascinating is that the Shinjus themselves don't seem to understand who they are, why they do what they do, or why they have that instinct. The Sasuke Shinju even made it seem as if he might not be that evil. He asks questions that remind a little bit of Koji questioning Amado's intentions. Kind of like how Koji is controlled by Amado with the indirect threat that if he doesn't comply with his orders, he could deactivate him. So Koji thinks about consequences and solutions. He knows when to comply and when to follow his own will. And so the Sasuke Shinju might do the same thing. He might be worried that if he doesn't do what the leader says, he may never find out the truth. Why he's so interested in Sarada. It could be that the Sasuke Shinju will actually sacrifice himself to save Sarada at some point. So if the Sasuke Shinju for some reason decides to follow his instinct to focus on Sarada, but instead of targeting her, he protects her, then maybe some of the Sasuke Shinju and the real Sasuke become one at some point in the future, because that's the will of the Sasuke Shinju, which will then give Sasuke not only the Rinnegan back, but also a bunch of other abilities, and to be quite honest, kind of an Otsutsuki update, so to speak, or rather a god update. Anyway, it's almost like the Shinjus are just like the persons they absorbed, but without any memory at all. The Sasuke Shinju clearly acts like Sasuke. He's not silly, he's not a perv like Bak still is, even as a Shinju. So they have the body of their host and thus a relationship with certain people that is unknown to them. They don't understand why, but the leader is the one who interprets this instinct as a target, leading them to the act of actually attacking them. And it works because they are just like artificial intelligence. They operate based on the context they know. If you fill in AI with hate, then that's what the response will be. And it's a fact that the Shinjus were introduced as conscious beings without context, and yet they seem extremely evil, but evilness itself is a context already. No one is born evil, but they are made evil. So if Shinjus are the personality of humans, then who made them evil? Especially because their hosts aren't really evil. Bak is at best a perv. And we don't know the main Shinju, but that's the point. I think it's pretty clear who has the control, the so-called leader, the one who interprets their instinct. And the only way these Shinjus could have an instinct in regard to those specific people is because they actually love them in whatever way. Family, crush, and well, you know, Bak. So there's no way they would naturally start attacking them unless the wrong context was put onto them by the main Shinju. He even seemed to have manipulated the Moegi Shinju from interpreting the fact that Konohamaru is sad and angry. The next logical thought would be, why is that? But he didn't let her consider why this is the case. It almost seemed like he quickly distracted. So either it's all a lie and they are not self-aware without context put onto them, but are somehow pre-programmed. Or if that's not the case and they really are like an empty shell filled by the environment, then it comes down to one question. Why don't the others instinctively know how to interpret their instinctive relationship to these people? But the leader does. If he manipulates them, who manipulated him? Who gave him the context of how to interpret this? And who told him to target Naruto? Or if it is an instinct, then who is he? Don't tell me this is supposed to be Kurama, but that's a topic for another video. For now, let's assume someone simply manipulates him, possibly even Amado. We have certainly seen him sometimes mumble either to himself or who knows, maybe using his glasses as a remote to communicate with the main Shinju if he was alive before every other Shinju. But more to Amado in a moment. Then we see Eida once again stalking as always, but Bak Shinju noticed it and walks towards her, and that's actually crazy because usually that shouldn't be the case unless the Rinnegan allows so. But then I would assume that Eida did the same with Sasuke from time to time, and yet he never noticed anything when his Rinnegan was still there. Of course she was only freed after that, but she pretty much confirmed that she was able to use the ability when being on standby, otherwise she couldn't have fallen in love with Kawaki. However, Sasuke did make it seem as if he can notice certain dimensional parallel moments, such as Momoshike's and Boruto's interactions, even if he didn't reveal whether he truly saw them or noticed that something is wrong. The point is, if the Shinjus are able to notice Eida and it's not because of the Rinnegan but because of another reason, then it can't be simply because they are Otsutsukis, as they are not. And the other reason would be that they are genetically related to Eida, which wasn't mentioned in regard to her stalking ability, but certainly to her charm ability. And as we can see, Bak Shinju was zero affected by her charm. Again, he's not an Otsutsuki. They haven't absorbed an Otsutsuki yet, and having Shibai's DNA within them is not enough. As Code has clearly demonstrated, even after his limiters were removed, he couldn't attack Eida. But Bak Shinju has zero problems looking directly into her eyes and telling straight to her face, "I choose you." And she just dropped her drink because she never encountered the being able to know that she's stalking them, and on top of that completely resist her charm. That's crazy. And so Eida for the first time noticed that she's in great danger. It's assumable that the Shinjus do have her DNA or she has their DNA, and because Amado created Eida, it links him to them once again, and with that, it means the leader could indeed be controlled by Amado, which based on his design could even represent Amado if we consider the fact that Moegi's hair also resembles the mask or whatever that is on the female Shinju. Speaking of Amado, as I have always told you, Amado will definitely know that something is wrong simply based on the code on his computer and the changes on Kawaki's body. Everything I told you happened to be true, so we are on the right track. Let's keep it going. So, Sumire mentioned Boruto to Amado. Obviously, she's aware that they are being watched and tries to lure out certain information from Amado so that they understand the situation better. It should be clear that Shikamaru is using Sumire for that purpose, and she obviously complies because she knows the truth about Boruto. But Amado has long ago understood that. He even directly confronted Sumire and said that she's stupid for being that direct. Meaning Amado knows what is happening and every answer he gives must be considered that way. So, Sumire isn't only working for Shikamaru to get information, but indirectly for Amado to get Shikamaru to know certain information that may or may not be true, depending on the context and goal Amado follows. And obviously he knows he's being spied on, like come on, he's a genius. So he can't say he believes Boruto is indeed Kawaki and Kawaki is Naruto's son because it's just obviously not true. He needs to work on Kawaki, not Boruto, so he can't pretend. The physical evidence doesn't support his lie, and Shikamaru isn't stupid. He's just trying to understand what is happening, because everything started once Amado entered Konoha and brought Eida in. And so I think we can at this point agree that Shikamaru definitely knows and just acts like he doesn't, even in front of Sarada, because he doesn't know whether Eida spies on them and whether whoever made Naruto disappear will then do the same with him. And since he's the smartest person in Konoha, he must be the one to stay at all costs. Especially as the Hokage, nobody will be able to handle that situation the way he does. The fact that Shikamaru definitely knows that something is wrong can be seen from the fact that his Hokage head was indeed not built even after 3 years. I told you already that because we haven't seen his head in the post-time skip scene, it means that he probably pretends to be Hokage because he knows that Naruto is still alive. Who knows, maybe even that one artificial chakra arm still functions, indicating that Naruto is still alive but somewhere stuck. I'm convinced Shikamaru knows and there's a cat and mouse game going on between him and Amado. So basically Amado is forced to admit that something is wrong, but he does this in a way that makes it seem as if he's still affected. It could very well be that he's not affected. In fact, it's ridiculous to assume that Amado doesn't know what ability Eida has. He definitely does, but for some reason he kept it a secret, just like Eida. So if both didn't mention it, how big is the chance that Eida and Amado actually have a deal going on? For example, if she complies, she can have Kawaki, and he will remove the deactivate thing on her and her little brother. She knows she has that thing because she certainly looked back in time to see what happened to her. And Amado is not that stupid to not exclude himself from her ability, or not to know her abilities in general. So if we assume he really was affected, he should still know what happened because he should know all of her abilities, and with that, easily conclude what happened. He could have fixed everything a long time ago, but he didn't, so that means he doesn't want to, which in turn means that he wanted that to happen in the first place, and it's most likely a deal he had with Eida. And Eida didn't change reality because of Kawaki's wish, but she interpreted his wish the way Amado wanted it. Something like that. She may not be fully aware of everything, but something along those lines could certainly be happening. Another interesting thing is that Amado says that there's no way anyone else could have modified Kawaki the way he is, because that's something only he is capable of. Which again points to my theory that Amado is from the future, because we know that in terms of artificial humans, Mitsuki is the prime technology, and yet Amado 15 years ago claimed to be able to resurrect the dead by cloning them, and then restoring the original memories and soul. And he even said that he has been doing this for a very long time, so at least 20 years, maybe 30 years, who knows. Since then, Amado's knowledge was far beyond the level of Mitsuki's creation, and this just makes no sense, because only about 5, 6, maybe 8 years ago, Mitsuki was created with the highest technology available. Besides, the lead scientist in Konoha has confirmed that what Amado does is not possible for human technology at that time, period. So if Amado says that it's impossible for anyone other than him to modify Kawaki the way he is, then that means that it's literally impossible because that's technology from the future, or from another planet or dimension. That's the only other explanation I have. But that will mean that neither he nor Akebi are humans, so is it actually possible that Akebi is Kaguya and Amado is her father? Which would explain why he's collecting the DNA of Uzumaki and Uchiha. Anyway, the last scene might only indicate a possible love interest between Boruto and Sarada. I think at this point their dynamic is no longer just being friends. And the way Sumire looked at them could also confirm that idea, because she was kinda, how can I compete with her, or so you like him too, or who knows, maybe she's just happy to see him. And that's it. So what do you think of this Boruto chapter review and the new Boruto Tubular Vortex chapter 5? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like, and if you want to see more Boruto content, then subscribe to this channel with the notification bell activated. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!